He never thought a rusty, broken car could change his entire life, but what his children did that day left him speechless, with tears rolling down his cheeks. For years he had carried the weight of unfulfilled dreams, never allowing himself to imagine that something so small yet so meaningful could touch him so deeply. His name was John, a man whose heart was bigger than his pocket, whose hands were calloused from labor, and whose life revolved around the children who once had nothing and now called him father. John was not their biological father, but love had erased the difference long ago. He had taken them in when they were young, when the world had abandoned them, and given them the warmth of a home. He never complained about the struggles, never once let them feel less than anyone else. Every sacrifice he made was hidden behind a gentle smile. If the children ate, he went hungry. If they needed new clothes, he wore his old shirts until the fabric nearly tore apart. His joy was in watching them grow, in seeing their laughter replace the silence of their painful pasts, yet there was one part of John's heart that remained tucked away, unseen by many but quietly noticed by his children. It was his love for cars. Not the shiny new ones that passed on highways, but the timeless classics, the kind that held memories in every curve of metal. Once, long ago, before life demanded every piece of him, John dreamed of owning such a car. He would pause in front of them whenever he saw one, his eyes glowing for a fleeting second before he turned away, pretending it was nothing. But his children noticed. They always noticed. Late at night, when John thought they were asleep, he would sometimes sit with an old magazine, staring at car pictures until his eyelids grew heavy. He never spoke of it because dreams felt like luxuries he had no right to keep. What mattered most were his children, and every coin he saved went to their future, never to himself. But in the silence of their shared home, the children spoke to one another. They whispered about his sacrifices, about how much he had given them without ever asking for anything in return. And from those whispers came an idea, one that grew with every passing day. They decided to give something back. Not just a gift, but a symbol of love as big as the sacrifices he had made. They didn't have much money, but they had determination. Slowly, they began saving whatever they could. A little from school allowances, some from part-time work, and even the coins they found at the bottom of their bags. Every small contribution became a building block for something larger. They didn't know if they would succeed, but the thought of seeing their father's smile was worth every effort. The search began quietly. The children looked through old advertisements, asked friends, and explored every corner where forgotten vehicles might rest. Finally, after weeks of hope and disappointment, they found it. A car that was far from perfect, rusted, dented, and barely holding itself together. To the world, it was scrap metal waiting for the junkyard. To them, it was treasure, because they knew what it would mean to him. They pooled their savings, hearts racing as they counted every last note, and bought it. When the car arrived, John was stunned. He stood frozen, staring at the rusty frame parked outside his home. His first words were filled with disbelief. Whose car was this? Had someone made a mistake? But then his children stepped forward, shy yet proud, their voices trembling as they said, "It's yours, Dad." At first he laughed, thinking it was one of their playful tricks. But when he saw their serious faces, when he noticed their hopeful eyes, the laughter faded. He asked again, his voice breaking, and they nodded. This wasn't a prank. This was love. A gift from the very children he once rescued, now rescuing a part of him he thought was lost forever. John approached the car slowly, as if afraid it might vanish. The door creaked loudly as he pulled it open, and with a hesitant breath, he sat inside. The seat was worn, the air smelled of rust and dust, but for John, it was something else entirely. Memories flooded back, long drives in his youth, dreams whispered to his late wife, the laughter they once shared in moments of freedom. He placed his hands on the steering wheel, trembling, and for a moment he wasn't the weary father anymore. He was the young man with dreams again, alive with the thrill of possibility. Tears slid down his cheeks, unexpected and unstoppable. His children stood nearby, uncertain if they had done the right thing, until he turned toward them. His eyes, wet with gratitude, held more love than words could carry. He reached out, pulling them close into his arms, holding them as tightly as he could. In that embrace, no words were needed. They knew. He knew. This was more than a car. This was a bridge between his past and present, between his sacrifices and their gratitude, between dreams lost and love found. In that moment, everything changed. The old, falling apart car was no longer just metal and rust. It became a symbol of connection, a reminder that love gives back in ways one can never predict. John realized something profound, that these children, who once needed him, had now given him more than he had ever dared to hope for. And the children, watching their father's tears, understood that sometimes the simplest gifts carry the deepest meaning. The evening stretched on, but time felt suspended. John remained inside the car, touching every detail as if memorizing it, while his children sat with him, listening to stories they had never heard before. He spoke of his younger days, of dreams he thought had died, of the joy of sitting behind a wheel and imagining roads that stretched endlessly. For the first time in years, his voice carried a lightness, as though the weight on his shoulders had lifted. That night, as they finally returned indoors, there was an unspoken bond stronger than ever. The children had given their father a gift, but in truth, he had given them something even greater, the joy of seeing him rediscover a part of himself he had buried long ago. And as John lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts drifted not to the hardships of tomorrow, but to the unexpected blessing of today. The car was old, yes, and far from perfect. But to John, it was the most beautiful gift he had ever received. It wasn't about the condition of the vehicle, but about the love it carried. And as he closed his eyes, he whispered to himself a truth he had nearly forgotten: happiness isn't found in perfection, it's found in love, in sacrifice, and in the moments when life surprises you with more than you thought you deserved. The night after the surprise, John couldn't sleep. He kept thinking of the gift his children had given him, their tired little hands saving every coin just so he could sit behind the wheel of a dream he thought he had lost forever. When morning came, he went outside again and stood before the car. The rising sun touched the metal, and though the car was rusted and worn, in his eyes it looked like gold. He opened the door and sat down, taking a deep breath as though he were inhaling hope itself. The children joined him, their smiles shy but filled with excitement, and in that moment a new chapter began. They decided together that the car shouldn't just sit there, it deserved life again. Not because of its value on the road, but because it had become a part of their story. The children insisted they could help restore it. Their hands weren't skilled, but they had energy, and John had knowledge. He began teaching them, not just about engines and bolts, but about patience, responsibility, and the joy of working together towards something meaningful. Every day after work, John would roll up his sleeves and gather with them around the car. They wiped dust from the windows, cleaned out the seats, and polished the smallest details. The children argued playfully over who did more work, laughing as grease stained their cheeks. John smiled at them, realizing that what they were fixing wasn't just an old car but the invisible cracks in their own hearts. The process was slow, but every step filled their home with laughter and purpose. Neighbors soon noticed. They saw the family gathered around the rusty car, working tirelessly, and their curiosity turned into admiration. Some offered tools, others shared spare parts, and one old mechanic even volunteered his weekends to guide them. What started as a small family project slowly grew into something that pulled the community together. People were inspired not by the car itself, but by the love that drove it forward. As days turned into weeks, the car began to change. The rust gave way to fresh paint, the broken parts were replaced, and the silence of the engine transformed into a hesitant roar that grew stronger with each attempt. The children cheered the first time it sputtered back to life, their voices echoing through the street, while John stood quietly, his eyes once again glistening. This wasn't just metal being restored, it was his own soul, healing with every sound of the turning engine, but the true transformation wasn't in the vehicle. It was in the man who once carried a lifetime of sacrifices without complaint. For years he had believed his only role was to give, never to receive. Yet here he was, sitting in a car rebuilt with love, realizing that his children had grown into people who knew the value of gratitude. He no longer felt like the man who had lost so much, he felt like the man who had been given everything that truly mattered. One evening, after the work was done for the day, John sat quietly inside the car with the door open, gazing at the stars above. His children had gone inside, leaving him in the gentle silence of the night. He thought of his wife, of the days when they once dreamed of traveling together, and he whispered softly as though she could hear him, "I didn't get to share these roads with you, but look at what we built, look at the family you wished for." A tear rolled down his cheek, but it wasn't from grief this time. It was peace, the kind that comes when a heart finds its way home. The day finally arrived when the car looked alive again. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it shined with effort, with fingerprints of love on every surface. The children jumped inside, their excitement uncontrollable, and begged John to drive. With nervous hands on the wheel, he turned the key. The engine responded, steady and strong. The car moved forward, not with speed but with pride. The children cheered as they rolled down the street, their laughter spilling out of the windows, while John felt his heart beating like a young man again. For the first time in decades, he wasn't thinking of bills, of struggles, or of lost time. He was thinking only of the road ahead, of the joy beside him, of the love that had carried him here. As they drove together, John glanced at the faces of his children. Their smiles lit up the car brighter than any headlights could. He realized then that family is not bound by blood, but by love, sacrifice, and the willingness to give without expecting in return. These children, once strangers to him, had become his world, and he had become theirs. The car was only a vessel, but inside it was everything he had ever needed. When the ride ended and they returned home, John gathered his children in his arms. His voice trembled as he said, "This car may be old and broken, but inside it, my heart feels new again. And it's all because of you." They held him tighter, their laughter mixing with tears, knowing that what they had given him wasn't just a car, but the restoration of his spirit. That night, as the family sat together, their hearts were lighter than ever. They didn't need riches, they didn't need perfection, because they had something greater, love that could turn rust into gold, sorrow into joy, and a broken dream into a new beginning. The car might age again, the paint might fade, but the memory of that gift would never lose its shine. And as long as they had one another, no road was too long, no challenge too heavy, and no dream too impossible. In the end, the gift wasn't the car itself. It was the reminder that life is not measured by what we own, but by the love we give and receive. John thought he had given everything to his children, but that day he understood the truth, they had given him everything too. And as he drifted to sleep, he held on to one simple truth that would never fade: sometimes the greatest treasures come not from wealth, but from hearts that know how to love beyond themselves.